the unknown to us, is starting by accepting fact, and then from there, love can grow. So, when you go to bed tonight, you just acknowledge facts of what happened during your day, facts about how you feel lying down in your bed, how you feel physically, mentally, and also how you want to be. And you will notice that if you put your mind in a certain direction before going to bed, your sleep is going to be affected by it. And if you put in your mind thoughts of love, thoughts of caring, thoughts of a genuine kind of feeling of that, right? Compassion also, then you will sleep very well. And then also you will wake up very well.
Whether one is listening to this in Myanmar or from outside the country, we know it is a very difficult time for those of us who hold the Golden Land and its people in our hearts. In trying times like these, we can all use a bit more care and compassion in our lives. So on behalf of the team here at Insight Myanmar, I would like to say, in the traditional way metta is offered, may you be free from physical discomfort. May you be free from mental discomfort. May you not meet dangers or enemies. May you live a peaceful and happy life. And may all beings be free and come out of suffering. And with that, let's move on to the show. And we're back for our third interview in an ongoing series with U Jāgara, and so many amazing points to consider and to learn about from really quite an incredible and dynamic life story. And we left off on the end of our second interview, which I encourage listeners to go check out those first two if you haven't already. But we left out just as U Jāgara had met Pa-Auk Sayadaw and was starting his many years in the Pa-Auk tradition, and we're going to look to move into talking more about Pa-Auk Sayadaw and the Pa-Auk method. But before we do that, I just had one follow-up question I wanted to ask about the last interview, which I realized since we ended, I've just been reflecting quite a bit on one thread you said I didn't pull at the time, and I've just been thinking more about and more curious and wanting to know. And that's that you had mentioned that in the early days of the Goenka mission, that there was this interest in, this initial interest that was never followed through, both of appointing not assistant teachers, but full teachers to give their own discourses and chanting, and the way you indicated, perhaps even go in the direction of their own traditions. And then in addition to those teachers, you also mentioned that there was a thought about teaching beyond what is found in the 10-day course format, or even the long course format that might teach jhanas or something, or other types of techniques or practices, and perhaps develop different centers for teaching further methods than are available now. Neither of those came to fruition. I just want to clarify first, did I get that right in remembering what you said the last time we spoke? And can you further clarify what you knew about these potential plans and ideas that never did materialize?
Well, in some of his first long courses, I remember that Goenkaji said that at some point, like he was just touching a little bit about the jhanas and, the dimensions, the type of state of mind that these practices were bringing. And he was explaining a little bit and saying also that some of us, the yogis who were practicing then at that time, were very close to these kind of attainment, if we call them in this way. But now it was not the time to develop it. The vipassana, the practice of insight, was the most important. But still, there was a kind of premise or kind of expectation or an idea that came from him, and he said that eventually, it was at Dhammagiri at that time. They had just started the place, and it was not that developed, but still, for the long courses, they had constructed another pavilion, outside of the usual small retreat pavilion hall, meditation hall. So in that hall, still, the land itself was not completely developed. So over there, he said that one day, there will be an area that could, there could be an area where he is going to teach us the kasinas and all the jhanas. So I remember that very well, and I think he was looking to get the adjoining property close to the mountains where it is even more quiet. And I think, that this came to his mind because this is what he learned from U Bakin. If we look at what we see as to what U Bakin was teaching, definitely he was teaching aspects of all the meditation subjects and the jhanas and the kasinas and all of that. It's still in Myanmar, in Burma, it's something that is it comes together with the old traditional package. So this was a kind of promise, but of course we can understand that it did not come to be realized, because the mission of the organization was mostly to spread the teaching and not to get people confused and not get people a little bit not off track but sidetracked with all these samatha kind of meditation, which is not the essential, although it can be useful if it is done properly. But also, like one excuse, not one reason that he could have been used is that in these discourses he was saying that now the jhanas, although they will come somehow with the practice of insight, and this is a fact. The jhana, as a samatha jhanas, will be developed. They will be also taught to people who have reached Sotapanna. So, according to the system that he taught, then even Sotapanna, he was not speaking so much about these, even these, kind of attainment, Sotapanna and Anagami. He was explaining them by way of theory, but as far as guiding people to achieve them and encourage to reach these, it was not so much the emphasis in this tradition. I mean, in the tradition that he had come now, to propagate this Dhamma on the worldwide scale.
Mm-hmm, right, and in speaking to Friedgard about this, if my memory serves me right, she gave two rationales as to why he didn't go on to teach this. One was that it was seen again as everyone knows very well that that Goenka's mission was to reach a wide number of students and to plant a lot of seeds rather than develop people to refined states as U Bakin. And secondly, that he simply wasn't so qualified in being able to teach this, that he had been able to, according to Friedgard, that he had been able to practice in this way, but was not so qualified to teach in the same way, that didn't have the paramis that U Bakin had to be able to teach in that style. But I also have a follow-up question with, choosing not to teach these methods or this practice is one thing, but I think what makes it very confusing is the rationale, the mythology, the narrative that then gets constructed, where he has, because if you go back and look at how this tradition is getting set up and established, you have different ways that U Bakin was teaching and different ways that Goenka is thinking about teaching. And for whatever reasons, he lands on the type of method or practice that he wants to impart on his students. Nothing wrong with that. That's what every great teacher of any practice would do. And then when he chooses that, what kind of practice he wants to disseminate to students, there then comes to be a message that is attached onto that, that's this and nothing else, this and only this through all of time, this and this practice being the one that all the forebears and the tradition, the lineage taught, going back to the Buddha, and this kind of superimposed history. And so I think for a serious student of the Goenka tradition, I think it could be a little bit unsettling and even threatening to hear that there were methods outside of the main method that is known today in the tradition that Goenka was open to, or that he learned, or that U Bakin taught, or that he was even considering teaching himself, because this seems to kind of hit at the primacy and the pristine purity and the kind of nothing to be added, nothing to be taken away of the technique as it comes out. And so I wonder what your thoughts are about the first Goenka made his plans as to what he was going to teach and how he was going to teach it, but then the words and the terminology and the mythology attached to the technique that he taught, as well as what he then decided for whatever reasons not to teach, how the kind of descriptions and words that were chosen went along with being attached to these practices that I think are still causing some degree of paranoia and confusion today among students in that tradition.
Yes, I think you bring an important point, but the challenge here is that the different methods, the different techniques that are spoken about and that are explained and exposed in the tradition are just methods of approaches. They are just approaches to the main thing. And the main thing is the investigating of reality, the investigation of mind and matter. This is the deal. So you can approach it with all kinds of practices, whether it is kasinas or meditation on the Buddha, or all these kamatana are eventually just approaches. Of course, they can be quite complementary, and it's important to understand in which way they can complement and help us to bring more balance in our practice, like how to incorporate the practice of metta with anapanasati, or the practice of sometimes marananusati, meditation on death, or loathsomeness of food, or whatever it is. These practices that are giving us a different taste of how to deal with the challenges that the mind brings. These practices are solely to bring a balance of mind, a clarity of mind, and this is samadhi. So from samadhi, then the technique, if we use these terms, then the technique is just the same. But to call that a technique is limiting, because it's more about understanding the process of what's happening. Understanding the process of what's happening in this mind and body. That's all. We are investigating about life, about being alive, and being alive in our body and in our mind. So the tradition and the commentaries and all the texts, they just point out the analysis of these phenomena can be done in either in a general way or in more specific and specialized way of analysis, but but it remains the same, that it's an investigation in Namarupa, and this is what is vipassana. Of course, over the decades, over the time that it came to be. The time that it came to be organized in such a frame of, kind of ready to sell and how to say, ready to serve also type of frame of technique. In 10 days, I mean, they really worked on how to present the thing in the most simple way, and then the less complicated and the more practical. So this is what they were aiming, because they didn't want people to argue and then start to go and elaborate all kinds of theory and all of that. So it came to be very practical. But the idea, if we look at the method itself, we see what they were referring to. So if we don't know what they are referring to, then we think, it's very limited. And of course, it's very limited. Like, okay, now you just sweep the body somehow, and you look at you experience the sensations, and you are just sweeping and saying anicca, anicca, anicca. Well, there is much more to that. Of course, a serious practitioner will come to realize that that the investigation is revealing much more depth. But still, the explanations are limited, and then also the frame in which it became to be set up. Came to have it came to be labeled as a method and as a technique, and eventually as the pure technique. So taking these words out, if we look at the tradition, then like the Theravada tradition or the tradition of Buddhism that goes on, since centuries, millennium, then it's very wide, but still it is coming to the same thing: how to understand this life that is experienced in this mind and with this body. So that's why, like if you look like once, many years ago, I came across, I was reading extracts of Ubakin disciple. It was published, at the IMC in UK. They made a lot of records of Ubakin's disciples, and there is a lot of material, explaining some stories of in the life of Ubakin, his relationship to his students. So there was one interview or one description of a student there, and it was Mr. Amersfoort or something like that. I forgot, sorry, the exact name, but if you look, you can find it. And then Ubakin explains in his short talk how he brought that person to the stage of Sotapanna, but somehow to justify himself, because we have to understand that Ubakin was in the tradition, in the society of religious orthodoxy, and then to be a meditation teacher over there, especially as a layman, you need to be quite strict in regard to the text and the commentaries and all of that. Otherwise, you get criticized. Otherwise, also you get put outside. So he was very careful, and then for that reason, but also because this is what he was using as a frame of reference. So in a note, Ubakin says that what I am teaching is in conformity with the Anapanasati Sutta and the commentary found in the Vinaya. So the Vinaya is the first, some of the first texts that were brought to Sri Lanka, where, just a few centuries after the Buddha passed away. And the commentary, especially that commentary, is very old. So if we look at what is there in the Anapanakata, the talk on the mindfulness of breathing, together with the commentary, then it's interesting, but it all comes to the same thing: a deep analysis of mind and matter, and then eventually seeing these phenomena just as a processes of changing phenomena. energies. And so, so just to say that we have many approaches, many types of methods, but eventually it all come to Namarupa, and not only the analysis, but the clear seeing, the direct experience of that is vipassana. When you have reached the stage of seeing these things just as impermanent and changing physical and mental processes.
And I think this also goes back to our mutual friends, Greg Kleiman, the way he came to see a lot of these traditions in Burma. And this is actually a very good kind of prelude to the Pa-Auk experience. It's not, I don't think it's so much a tangent, it's actually kind of building up to being able to understand it better in all kinds of ways. But referencing what Greg said, another longtime Western yogi and monk, lived many years in Burma and fluent in Burmese, reference that he's panning for gold, that all of these traditions that they've kind of built their own infrastructure, their own methodology, if you want to call it propaganda, where they've taken some very good ideas that you can pan for gold. And the act of the imagery of panning for gold is that there's real gold among the pebbles and dust and other things that you would find in a stream as you're kind of shifting that pan to be able to retain the gold in there. He's referenced how some of these traditions have built up, and teachings and techniques, if you want to use that word, and rationales and everything have come along with it, that to maintain this kind of skeptical attitude, critical attitude, maybe a better word, to be able to absorb and open to the wisdom that these teachings and these different traditions in Burma especially are bringing to you, but to pan for gold in terms of not being taken in wholesale by them and being able to, in Greg's case, have a direct relationship with the words of the Buddha, and to always be going back to those direct words and balancing that with what the teacher and the tradition and the technique is also telling you.
Well, yeah. So it's interesting that you make the parallel with gold, because I think they call the Burma, Myanmar, they call it the golden land, and of course they had a lot of gold. But as such, if we look at the text, not the commentaries, but if we look at the text, if you forgot, or if you had not looked, if you had not seen in the Anguttara, you have two texts, and they speak about the goldsmith. And the practice is actually the simile they are using is just like a goldsmith that is digging the earth, and then cleaning the soil, and getting rid of the dust, and then eventually coming to fine dust, and then finer dust, and then still purifying, and then eventually it comes to pure gold. So the analogy of gold is kind of relevant, in the sense that not only it's something that the tradition is offering riches, something quite valuable, but the goal itself as a way to get something very valuable, is the simile of how to get to it is parallel with the practice. Not only practicing meditation, but also the aspect of ethics, the behavior, the sila, and the different types of thoughts that the mind is having, and then eventually when the mind is very clear, clear like gold, it becomes very malleable, and then you can do any kind of ornament with it. So this is the outcome of a pure mind, a mind of samadhi, where the potential of the human mind is shown there, and then all the psychic powers that they used to practice over there. This is shown, but also eventually it's the touching to the essential, which is understanding reality by direct experience, by direct contact and understanding, and then getting liberated and having the final knowledge. So it's a process. We have many similes that are referring to the same thing. So basically the suttas will explain in a general fashion, but the details have to be seen first with the practice, but also with well, with the help of people who have gone through this process, how to recognize gold, how to filter the dust, and you have many tricks that a goldsmith will know, but not someone who didn't go through the apprenticeship. So we are all like apprentice, and then we have to look at the goldsmith, and then the goldsmith will tell us his tricks. So that's all. So the, the tradition is just how to, to change. To change earth into gold, like an alchemist.
Wonderful. So, with all that background, I think we can move into your time at Pa-Auk and get back on your journey as well. So, can you, going back to your personal life and where you were at that time, we left off with you having had your interlude in France and having this commitment to then come back to Burma. And I believe it was this trip back to Burma which then for the first time brought you into contact with Pa-Auk Sayadaw. So if you can take over and tell the story from there.
Okay, yes. Then, like I was coming back from France, and I picked up, I met my two friends, a Czechoslovakian monk and a Canadian monk that I knew for many years. And then the three of us went over there, and then we went also knowing another friend who had been a monk with us in Sri Lanka, a guy from France, and then he was at Pa-Auk. So he had informed the Pa-Auk Sayadaw that the three of us were coming, and so they arranged everything. When we arrived in Yangon, they set up the whole flat, and they received us with the first class type of reception. They took care of us for about a week, like a princess almost, and then they arranged our trip to Pa-Auk. So when we arrived there in Pa-Auk, as mentioned, for myself, I was quite impressed with the Sayadaw, because not only he was shining and brilliant, but also any questions you will ask him, he will go with plenty of details that I had never heard in such a precision. So this kind of faith that arose in us with my friends made us stay there. And then, under his invitation and suggestion, we stayed there and practiced under him. And I remember that before going there, people were telling us, in Pa-Auk, good, it's a good place, and the Sayadaw is great, but don't expect to succeed in this meditation. It's too hard. Nobody is nobody. I mean, it takes a long time to achieve anything, and then so far no Westerners had achieved anything over there. So we were not discouraged, but not fed with anticipation. Nevertheless, because of our practice, and this is what I see, is that people who had a good practice, and especially I found for myself, well, like all the experiences, the many years, I had been practicing for a little bit more than 20 years in relatively, with the method that we see with Goenka. So these years of practice, my friends also had also gone through their own practice, and they had experience. So because of that, then I can say that it was relatively easy for us to go through the training of the Pa-Auk Sayadaw. So every day we were meeting with him for a few hours, and then he was giving us individual instructions, all different to the three of us. And after 6 months, somehow, we had gone through the whole, his whole curriculum, all the things of Samatha, and also we had gone through the process of vipassana. So people were very surprised, and I think it's at that time, like the word. I don't want to say that it's us, and then we were exceptional, but definitely I think the word is spread around, and after a few weeks, from Yangon, the group of people from the religious affair of, the Ministry of Religious Affairs, they came with a crew of cameramen, and then they did a short film, and then they interviewed the monks over there, especially the foreign monks, but they were keen to have the testimony of the three of us, we whom had achieved, or not achieved, but we were able to go through that complicated meditation course of the Sayadaw. So, so from that point, then I think he started to be much more popular, and then it attracted people from all over the place. Then from Sri Lanka, so, the Sinhalese also heard about that, and then you had a delegation of Sri Lankan top monks who heard about that, and they say, yes, like this is so this is a teacher, the Burmese teacher, who is teaching really according to the commentaries and using the Visuddhimagga, and this is what this belongs to us, like the Visuddhimagga and many of the commentaries were taken to Sri Lanka, and then from there, translated from Sinhala, and then from Sinhala to Pali again, and then from there again they were shared to a great extent with Burma and Thailand also. But it's the same tradition. So these monks sent a group of monks also just to be trained under the Pa-Auk Sayadaw. So then also you had monks from Malaysia, and then a lot of Chinese monks also who heard about that. And so the word got around that this teacher is teaching something that is very deep, and all the aspect of the technical methods that we find in the Theravada traditions, and then people can achieve that if you practice seriously. So it's not that we need to make expectations, because I have seen, and then we still see people coming over there, even monks who had a lot of practice before, and then fully engaged, fully honest and sincere in regard to the practice, practicing full time for months, and then sometimes for years, and not succeeding. So again, this is not a dilemma, but it's a question. Is it the only method? Is that the only method? So we are stuck again in this interpretation. Is it the only method? Is it the only way to do such a complete development of samatha practices, and then also a very deep analytical kind of vipassana? Is that the only way, or there can be shorter methods? So this is why we have to keep open and to see that, well, this is a way, but it's not for everybody, definitely.
And for those who might not be so familiar with Pa-Auk or have practiced themselves, can you give a description of how you would describe the Pa-Auk practice? I know that's a very loaded question, and I know there's not just one Pa-Auk practice, but for the listener who is not so familiar with the method or the Sayadaw, how would you give an introduction describing what it is and what he teaches?
Well, first of all, he emphasizes samadhi. So concentration is really the key for him, and he says that generally, with some other methods, we will not give names, but with some other methods, people don't get enough concentration. The mind is not clear enough, and not enough samadhi, so they cannot see what he is requiring the yogis to see, like a very deep, very detailed analysis of matter. So this is why, in general, people who go there will spend months. Of course, you have some people who will be able to achieve the degree of samadhi within a few weeks, but still a minimum degree of samadhi, which now they have systematized their method, and now the requirement for samadhi is very demanding. You need to achieve the 4 jhanas, and well, it's this is not what he was teaching at the beginning, but definitely a minimum of samadhi is required, and and then from there, then the the vipassana will be touched, will be approach. But also, I have met with yogis who had been there before, a long time ago, and they were not necessarily practicing very, very deep jhanas and samadhi before they were taken to vipassana. So one of his key method, or one of his not trademark, but originality, is the way that he is explaining the four-element meditation. So the four-element meditation is the fundamental, it's the basis of vipassana. When someone is able to look at the body, use the body also as his base, and then from there developing a samadhi with the four elements, and then from the samadhi seeing very detailed aspects of these four elements, which is not the concepts and the idea we have about the body. The body is completely deconstructed and perceived and analyzed by way of the four elements. So this is this is very important, because many other methods, they touch that, because this is the first step of vipassana. If you go with the traditional scheme, this is the first step of vipassana, but very rare. Very rarely you will see other methods going into the details of it. Ledi Sayadaw goes to some extent, and then explains also the variant of the different need. If you can use a detailed method of analysis, or you can go also with a general type of analysis of the four elements. So basically, this is what it consists: kind of a very good samadhi, and then the four element meditation is the basis. And then from there, because also someone will have done a good deal of samadhi, then the analysis that is done with the chitta, with the mind, is also decorticated, is also deconstructed by way of the mental factors, the 52 types of mental factors. And all of these are analyzed, all of these one by one are explained and understood. So again, we see the value of decorticating, of deconstructing all the component of what we call the mind. And then then it goes on with the different types of consciousness, and like what we see in the modern Abhidhamma schedule, in the modern Abhidhamma format. So this is what it is. So basically, also, I must say that when he was dealing with us, his method was not, he had not written his book, and it was not put into paper really. So when he was teaching, he was a little bit improvising with each person, and then he will go depending on the individuals. But still, with us, this is how he was proceeding. But at the end, even at some point, we realized that that practice was based on the Abhidhamma, but it was based on the practicality of the experience of what we find in these books. And then I mentioned to some of my friends that before in Sri Lanka I was reading about the Abhidhamma, but I was finding that quite boring. But over there, it's not reading, it's not speaking about these things, about this theory, but it's actually seeing that in your own body and your own mind, without giving too much importance on the theory. You just go and experience these things, and from the experience, then he says, it is from the experience, it is being classified, and then the classification is quite conform to what we see in the commentaries and also in the Abhidhamma. Of course, we can question everything, but this traditional frame seen in the commentaries and also in the Abhidhamma is something that can be reliable if we don't necessarily reify it. It's just a system that is made by humans, but still a system that is made out of experience of very serious yogis in the old days. So this is what is amazing. We see that what is this explained in these books, uh, are sending us to what can be experienced in the meditation. So I think this is the enthusiasm and the kind of awe and wonder we had every day, in every hours when we were practicing with him, because we were discovering actually what we had somehow a bit touched or experienced before, but we were discovering that with the possibility to recognize and then to understand, okay, what is this, what is this in regard to the body, in regard to the mind, like we can understand it, what's happening in our body and mind on an intuitive level, with also the direct experience, but from the intuition, then the possibility for us to make a map, because that's all what it is. It's just a map. So to have a clear map help us much more to locate ourselves in a frame that is helping us to direct and to understand, where we are, and also to understand where we are going and where we are coming from somehow. So this is just the Pa-Auk Sayadaw has the repetition to have a very detailed type of method. That's all. The details also are using the commentaries and the Abhidhamma as their basis.
And I think when Pa-Auk first came on the scene and started to be more well known, there was something controversial about what he was teaching and how he was approaching it. This is probably, to put this in context, I don't know how many meditation traditions in Burma, when they come on the scene, are not controversial, because by definition of doing something new and formulating the practice in a way that was different than how it was seen before. And I think this also goes back to our conversation about the dynamic and creative and innovative ways that sometimes aren't seen on the surface. I think when Goenka, when Ledi, when U Bakin, when Mahasi, Mogok, Sunlun, etc. I think when these teachers and teachings first and traditions first came on the scene, I think there was something kind of unsettling and breaking through and innovative about what they were doing compared to what came before. Pa-Auk is a more recent iteration of this. I think you could even go more recent than him with someone like U Tejaniya, and what he was teaching and doing being controversial in a different way. But to set the scene, kind of understand what the context was in terms of the ways that these Burmese traditions and lineages up to that point had been formulated in teaching, and then how Pa-Auk came on the scene. What can you tell us about in what ways how he was approaching this? In what ways was that seen as controversial or as non-conventional in terms of what was being understood and practiced and taught at that point in Burma?
Yes, everything that is observe, when we try to understand something like this, all the time it's important to come back to context. So what was the context over there? The context was that the practice of vipassana had started to be taught to lay people, and to some extent it became a bit of easy kind of propagation, and you had even some schools that were giving certificates of attainment. So now you are Sotapanna, and then they had a stamp, right? So this is new systems, or a new direction is always, very often, innovation is in regard to reaction of the statu quo, a reaction that tells you that, well, this is not enough, or maybe there is something else. So this context of a generalization of a kind of superficial type of methods, and then I don't say, this is not to say that these methods that are taught or that were taught in these days were necessarily superficial. If we don't understand them properly, we can say they are superficial. So with this attitude, with this standpoint, then the Pa-Auk Sayadaw went into his own practice, and then, he really dig into the matter, and then came with something much more, not substantial, but much more precise. And then it became controversial because, again, like I think it's just a human tendency. When we find something good, then we think, eureka, eureka! I found gold. And if you have not touched this thing, then it's not gold. It's fake. So somehow, his position came to be questioned because he was questioning other methods, and he was sometimes this questioning other methods or other schools were purposeful, they were appropriate, but sometimes also his criticism was not appropriate, in the sense that, this cannot, if we understand what they are doing, then it's quite okay, and it's very appropriate. So this is why, and I think Greg also explains that the controversy that arose then, especially with the school of Mahasi Sayadaw, with Upandita, then they became two clans. And one was promoting, the best method, and then denigrating also the other one. So there was a kind of subtle fight, although, the Pa-Auk Sayadaw will say, no, I'm not fighting with them, but they are fighting with me. And somehow also it is true, because when he wrote this big thesis about 3 very thick volume of theory, how he is teaching and all of that, then he wanted to have, and it was needed, to have the approval of the Sangha Council so that it can be published in Burma. So the Sangha Council that were supervising and looking at the material that could be published were most of them Mahasi Sayadaw's school. Also, when they were seeing the criticism, because definitely he criticized, the Pa-Auk Sayadaw criticizes aspects of what we see in the Mahasi school. When they saw this criticism, then they just reacted, and then they just censored a lot of his chapters because it was too much. He was just giving too much of what is required to attain something genuine, something genuine on a Buddhist spiritual path. So because it was it was just too much. So this is where the controversy arose. And still, like if we think that all these things that are taught in this system, in the Pa-Auk system, are needed to be, to achieve any genuine spiritual goal, then I think we are off track, because for sure, people who have not practiced all these things can have also genuine achievements and credible kind of wisdom and understanding, for sure. So I think this is where any controversy arises, when you think, when when people start to think that that you are better than everyone.
So, in looking at the context of this time, looking at the context of these 1980s, 1990s, what was being taught, how meditation techniques were being developed according to understanding of different texts that they were being referred to, what specifically was Pa-Auk Sayadaw doing that, and how was he interpreting things and teaching that was so different and so controversial to what was happening around him, just in a practical and methodological approach at that time?
We can say that in the 50s, then the councils of the Sasana for the propagation of the Theravada doctrine, Dhamma, then they had come to to the conclusion that what is fundamental, and then what should be promoted is the practice of vipassana. So vipassana practice became to be what needs to be emphasized, and also this is what needs to be exported, if at all there was to be any kind of proselytism, internationally. So this emphasis on vipassana came to denigrate any practice of samadhi, any practice of jhana, and people associated jhana with the psychic powers, and then with the zogi, with people outside of the Theravada Buddhism, and it could lead, they were saying, or they were, kind of taking the position that, well, if you just practice jhana, then you will go astray. So this kind of emphasis really triggered the teachers of these days, and then they defended themselves. Like I remember someone was telling me, an elder person was very close to Mahasi Sayadaw, and that had been there when he was starting to teach. And then she told me that at the beginning, when I think sorry, it's not the person who told me that. You can see that in one of his book, and he says there, it is written that he is not teaching anapanasati, he is not teaching jhana, and it's kind of, wow, why is he defending himself as to what he is not teaching, which is not necessarily against Buddhism, but for sure, for him, he was not teaching jhana, and then he was not teaching somehow anapana. It is in one of his book. Of course, if you look at the school over there, like Upandita was a jhana master. Upandita was a jhana kasina mastery. When I was also at the Sasanayakta, we had another monk, a Malaysian monk, who was very developed, and he had a lot of practice. And when we were there, he was doing the kasinas, all these very complicated samatha exercises. So it's not to say that the Mahasi school was not teaching jhana and then all the samatha, but they didn't want people to see them as teachers of samatha. So this is why the Pa-Auk Sayadaw, with the text and all of that, he was saying, no, jhana is very important. Samatha also is essential for you to see clearly. And then if you don't have enough, which was the case in some approaches, if you don't have enough samadhi, then the depth of your practice is not going to be going to the end. So this is the context.
It's so interesting because you're describing Pa-Auk Sayadaw as being very forthright and open about his teaching of jhana and samatha and the importance of it, and putting it front and central, being very direct with having yogis be able to practice this first and foremost, and not kind of building a case about its role with the Vipassana practice, but just putting it central in its own way and not dancing around the fact. And when you bring up the examples both of the Mahasi tradition and with Mahasi and then later Pandita, and with the U Bakin tradition, both with U Bakin and then later Goenka, you see examples in both of those cases where some type of kasina, jhana, samatha is being practiced in those traditions, but it's kind of not addressed or talked about, it seems to me, in a very direct, open way. It's kind of an advanced practice that is taught to advanced students, but not really being publicly or formally stated in the same way. It's being done more in the background. It's being known or discussed, but not quite so openly. Or when it is being practiced, it's kind of the whole framing then comes in. Well, this is part of no, don't worry. This is a practice that we're doing that then is supporting the Vipassana practice, or it's a stage in the later Vipassana practice. So it seems very tricky and complicated to talk about, because it's not so much much that it seems to me, in hearing you talk, that Pa-Auk is doing or promoting a different practice. It seems, because there are these examples and precedents in both of these other lineages and how it's coming out and how it's being practiced and talked about. It seems what's more controversial is that he's not dancing around the way that and the way that he's framing it, that is just being very open in how this practice can develop and what the yogi can do, and not having to bring in the crux of vipassana to justify it, but it can be there standing on its own, and it's not this kind of inside-outside language or public and private framing and discussion. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah. I think your explanation is elaborated, and I think it's fair to say this. It is fair to say this, and yeah. So because of his openly teaching the samatha and all the jhanas in his retreats, then he became to be renowned as a samatha master, and then as a samatha teacher. So also there had been some misunderstanding, like some outsiders, who have not been there or who don't know so much the Pa-Auk system. They say, yes, at the Pa-Auk monastery, you just practice samatha. Because it takes so long for people to come to vipassana that you have some, serious people. They will go there and they will practice for months, sometimes for years, and then the only thing that they will get out of it is very deep quality of jhana. So the repetition is sometimes, sometimes the repetition is at Pa-Auk. You just practice the jhana, but this is for sure not the case, and the sadhu is very keen to make it clear, and then for someone who is succeeding on the path of samatha, then there is always something else, and he say, okay, now this is your attainment, and now look, this is not enough. And then he was kind of pushing people to see what is better. So it's just like every day the teacher will come with a different type of ice cream, and then getting more refined, and then at the end he will tell you, well, this dish of meat, this much more nutritious than just a sweet type of ice cream. There is nutriment. So eventually, this the piece of meat that he was offering is the vipassana, just as a symbol. It's very clear that the whole structure of his teaching is based on the vipassana, and then the block, the block of samatha is just a mean to come to the end, where the vipassana is going to be the primordial practice. So for sure, it's just that if you are beginning, then because they separate vipassana and samatha, then if you are in the process of doing samatha, then you will do that for weeks and months, and then you will not be in touch with the vipassana. So you can think, so some people can think, samatha is really emphasis, and really samatha is a kind of end by itself. But no. There are always some steps and grades where eventually, to whichever high attainment of jhana you reach, then you end up in the field of vipassana. And this is clear. This is very clear. I think all his books and all his teaching is clear about it. But if you just come like this and you don't know about the general teaching, then you may believe that they practice, because for sure when you see these yogis, also if you listen to interviews that the teachers are giving to yogis, then there is a lot of samatha, and then the attainments that some of these yogis report is kind of impressive. That's it.
Another difference that I've heard in Pa-Auk is that I think stands out from some of these other main traditions that we're talking is I feel there's this kind of universalist message in some of the vipassana practices, that this is something, kind of a one-size-fits-all, you can say, that anyone can come, you practice this technique, you'll get the kind of improvement and gains that you should just by practicing, by everyone practicing the same technique in the same way, you'll eventually get to the same place. And where with Pa-Auk, I've heard that people can come in and have just vastly different experiences. You even referenced your very first touch with Pa-Auk was you came with 2 other fellow meditators. There were 3 of you. You were given 3 different sets of instructions. And so also I've heard that people have come in and just in just a matter of months have been able to progress through the jhana at really astounding rates of development in a practice, where others have come and I've heard anecdotes of yogis spending years really struggling to get to make any kind of progress in just getting through practicing even one jhana instruction. And so, would you say that is a difference in terms of how meditators have come in through learning Pa-Auk, and a difference or distinction with how they may learn a vipassana practice in terms of the methodology and the approach in the instruction and the progress that's made?
Yeah, this is the difference. Like you are not explained about vipassana until you finish the samatha. And as you say, some people can go through the requirement of the samatha very fast, but some also can delay and just require a lot of time. So that's the thing. This is the thing.
And going back to your personal journey in meeting Pa-Auk Sayadaw, practicing this technique for as long as you did, what was about it for you that was so personally appealing?
Well, it's just that it helps you. It was helping me to understand so much the practice that I was doing before. And because when you practice by yourself, like as a monk, and the freedom we had, especially in Sri Lanka, and also going to long retreats, even with Goenka, the detailed understanding of what's happening is not given. So this is what I appreciated so much with the Pa-Auk Sayadaw, because he was giving so much explanations and so much details of what the experience was, and how we could refine our understanding of the experience as well as refine the experience itself. So I think this is the refinement that make us, not only myself but my 2 friends also, that made us so happy and interested.
And you would go on to spend quite some years at the Pa-Auk in studying and then eventually learning how to teach. Can you tell us about how that shaped up as the years went on?
Well, first, I think that the practice can always be like reviewed, and because before the Pa-Auk Sayadaw asks someone to teach, it requires some experience in the field somehow, and quite a good knowledge of the texts. So for myself, this is also what I did, in the sense that I practice at the Pa-Auk monastery, mostly meditation for a few years, 2 or 3 years, and then eventually I ended up, in the Shan state and in a Pariyati monastery, where I was able to learn the Burmese language and read the texts, read the commentaries, read also all kinds of other meditation teachers. Also, anyway, at some point for myself, at some point in the first year when I was at the monastery, then there was, I think she was Burmese, but a lady, a yogi, coming from America, and then she had heard, she had heard about the Pa-Auk Sayadaw, and she had come there, and then she was quite impressed with him, and then she invited him to IMS. This was in the 90s, and the Pa-Auk Sayadaw said, yeah, well, let's see, and then a few days later on, then he asked me. He said, "Well, if I am invited, to the States, will you be willing to come with me?" And I said, "Yeah, it's fine." So only 4 or 5 years later, then the invitation came to be true, and he went there, and I also accompany him. So I can say, although I had seen how he was teaching, and I had some experience of how to, to help people and to guide people in what I had learned, but still, by being with him when he was in the West, not only in the United States, but also I accompanied him when he was in Europe, in Germany, and other places. And then, just by being present and supporting, sometimes the translation when he had interviews with the yogis, and I learned a lot of all his methods. So altogether, I spent a few years just being with him and seeing how he is dealing with different students, especially in the West. And so this is how it came to be what it is.
And so from that trip and seeing that, I assume that was Pa-Auk Sayadaw's first trip teaching outside of Burma, that invitation, and you accompanying him. How did your journey then progress in terms of being within the Pa-Auk tradition? And I realize I'm pausing as I say that because I know very well about the formal appointments and responsibilities in the Goenka tradition, setting up different centers, having different teachers' roles, how those appointments go. I realize I don't exactly know the formality of how the Pa-Auk mission then developed in terms of centers abroad and teachers. And so how did your involvement as a practitioner and teacher then start to fit into that the growing satellite and formal mission of Pa-Auk?
Yes, so I think maybe because of my experience, being involved in the West and propagating somehow, technique with Goenka, I was aware of what people needed, and aware also about different ways to adjust the presentation with what was needed with the yogis. So I have to admit that when I went with the Pa-Auk Sayadaw, I was quite enthusiastic about helping him and propagating his method. Also, I was really for it. But the more I did it, the more I saw that. Well, you had a lot of people coming with a lot of experience, very experienced yogis, sometimes teachers, who had been teaching for a long time, and I was seeing that they were not reaching anything. They were there came to be a lot of frustration and a lot of not only disappointment, but feelings were not so good. Because they were not able to come to the standard of Samatha, especially that was required with this method. So I made a kind of bilan, a kind of conclusion or kind of assessment about what had been the percentage of yogis who succeeded, especially he went through almost 3 consecutive years. Every 2 years he will go at the first refuge in Bari, and then he will teach for 3 months, or sometimes also once he taught for 4 months. So all these months, then I was with him. So the percentage of success could be rated as only 5%. So when you look at that, then you see, well, what is wrong? Is it that these yogis are missing something, or is it that what is taught is not adjusted to what they can? So that questioning came to be a stimulation for my research in the tradition itself, and then I stepped out a little bit, of the system of the Pa-Auk organization, and then I did some more of readings, and then also going to see different teachers and how they were understanding the practice, how they would explain which type of methods they were doing. And then I was also studying the commentaries and the sub-commentaries. And somehow, I made a frame that was enabling me and anyone who understands it properly to adjust to what people need. So then you are able to satisfy or at least give some very tangible practice to what is needed when you are helping people. So that's why I am at some point I just backed up and I started to be a little bit more independent because any kind of system, when it comes to be an organization, then it is too strict and it is too rigid. Whereas, as we discussed last time, I think a tradition needs to be alive and always have the possibility to adjust itself to the society, or at least to the people that it is touching. So this was my main concern, what to give to people that they are going to be able to benefit from it and understand it, and also having the possibility to to deepen their understanding and practice. So this has been my concern, and this is the research, or the kind of things that I digged into the tradition. That's why I say that the tradition itself, the Theravada tradition with the commentaries, we have to acknowledge that it kept alive with the commentaries. Then I can say that the tradition gave me a lot of a variety of of things that can be proposed and that can be used. So that people don't have only one method, and if you don't fit there, then you are a failure. This is not the case in Dhamma. Eipasiko and Hopaneiko right there. Come and see and realize it for yourself.
So there had to be a kind of adjustment that was made from the ways that it sounds like a cultural adjustment, really. I mean, I don't know if it's to what degree it goes into cultural or psychological or religious or even linguistic, but it sounds like, and it's so interesting having someone such as yourself at the early stages of that mission to be not just a fly on the wall, but actually, you'd say, part of the team or part of the cultural translators, and obviously religious and linguistic translators as well. But that as that mission took off, how he had built himself and what he was doing and teaching in Burma, that there were different needs and responses in other countries, and I think that also just kind of brings us to this wider conversation that we've touched on before of just this transmission of Dhamma, and what is the relationship and what is the balance between making sure that what is being taught and practiced adheres to the original teachings and what we know of the text and of the development, the stages that have to be reached, but then also knowing that as you look at one-size-fits-all practices or something that works in one place, but then for whatever reason, and I think what those reasons are is really fascinating to be able to know to a greater extent. Why is it not having the same effect? What particularly about the ways that it's being taught, or the student body that's coming to learn based on it could be, not so much the superficial things of the cultural or linguistic, or even the food. People talk about just what their intake of food is and how that's affecting their health and well-being. But maybe it's deeper aspects of the cultural biases, or you can say the cultural conditionings of being born into that culture, being shaped by that culture, and then how that messaging is then coming. So I'm curious, as someone along with this mission, what were you seeing? What's your guesses or your understanding of why these initial courses were not having the same impact, where there was that disconnect? And then as you did that deeper analysis, what changes were then made to try to meet that student body where they were and be able to have a different impact?
Well, just to make it short, I think you are touching the main things, and the adjustment that needs to be applied for people to understand and get something out of that is, as mentioned, the linguistic and also the culture, and aptitude. Also, the possibility for people to have the quietness and the support that we see, the ambience that we see in a society that has kept a traditional life for centuries. So this is not all that in the West. The ambience is not obvious, and but for sure the linguistic aspect and also the cultural aspect are what is often, a blockage. So this is why also, really to be, I think, a good interpreter, to someone who is able to interpret or translate kind of living teaching. I think the to soak and really to understand the tradition in the culture in which it has been preserved is essential. So first of all, the taste, and then the understanding of the culture that preserve the tradition is very important. So from there, then you are able to adapt it to any kind of sauce, any kind of dishes that is possible. But if you start right at the beginning, just to try to adapt something that has not been fully mastered or not fully understood, then all kinds of bias and going astray is more likely to be possible. So this is why I think someone who has really soaked in the tradition will not necessarily be a traditionalist and not be necessarily just an orthodox kind of person, but someone who will be creative, someone who will be able to adjust the understanding and the truth. We are speaking about truth, so truth is universal. Truth also is beyond any cultural values. Truth is something that is what is. So touching that, but also having understood it in the ways that a culture has maintained it, enables you to shape it also in another culture, or in a frame that is going to be slightly different than the original one, but still with the same roots, and then with the same kind of material content, but not necessarily with the same language, expressions, and social kind of conventions.
And did you find that the Pa-Auk Sayadaw, to what degree was he able to adjust and adapt and be flexible, and to what degree was there orthodoxy in the methods that he had developed and the expectations of how he wanted to practice them, even in different audiences?
Well, if we look at the personage, he is quite a person, so he is quite admirable, in the sense that he had been a monk since he was quite young, maybe 10 years old or something, and then he studied, like the usual curriculum that you see in the monasteries with, a lot of exams and pari and all of that, and he went into solitary practices. He did ascetic practices and all of that, but also on the side, he wanted to be a teacher and then to teach also to foreigners. So he learned English, and as much as possible, he was quite interested with the ways that the foreigners will think, and so he was quite curious. So if we take his background, like just a small village over there, uh, uh, to come, to international recognition is quite amazing. But still, the cultural gap will always be there, and it's unavoidable. Just even with the language, I was told, and this sometimes this what I was doing is English, although it was quite good, and at some point you get used to it. He speaks quite well, but still his pronunciation and sometimes the words that he uses are not having, they are not understood and may have connotations that are not intended. So again, like you say, the culture is not the same. And it's a huge difference of how people think in the East and the West. It doesn't mean that the two cannot be united. The two cannot be combined. As a wise person, I think this is Aldous Huxley who was saying that the East and the West are different, and never are they going to be melting together. But for a wise person, then this is possible. So we are talking about something universal, but the challenges of culture is and linguistic is can be a little bit of a problem. So anyway, this is the challenges that any teachers, any teacher outside Western culture will have as challenge to convey his message to the audience.
And so, do you consider yourself a teacher in the Pa-Auk tradition?
Oh well, I consider myself now. I am kind of explaining, the teaching. So you can say I am a teacher, and in the Pa-Auk tradition, I was, like I once I told the Pa-Auk Sayadaw, I told him that one day if I am a teacher, I'm not going to teach the Pa-Auk method. And then he laughed and he said, "What is this? I am not teaching the Pa-Auk method either." So I think the Webu Sayadaw also said something. I'm not teaching the Webu Sayadaw method, So he is teaching that kind of traditional teaching. This is the Buddha's teaching that has been preserved for centuries. So this is what we are trying to convey. And if we know it, we know that it has many faces. It has many possibilities to be explained. So it's not limited to a method. I think a good teacher will know that a method is useful, and they can use methods to train people and then to share the teaching. But the method is not the Dhamma. The Dhamma is much bigger than that. So touching the Dhamma, then you can use the methods, and then you don't have necessarily a Pa-Auk method. But as for your question, if we give credit to these words, then because I adjust my expressions and the way that I convey the message to the people that I'm talking to, I don't think that I am teaching the Pa-Auk method so much because it requires too much samadhi. I can teach all these things of samadhi, but people don't have time here. I am dealing mostly with lay people, so time is lacking, and also social conditions also are lacking. The society is not so quiet, so it's difficult for people to reach these states of samadhi. As mentioned before, at the forest refuge, 5% of the yogis had been successful. So from that experience, and I thought, well, maybe the Pa-Auk method need a little bit more of adaptation, but still the fundamental, can be kept, because in some cases the Pa-Auk Sayadaw was not always emphasizing jhana, but he was starting people with just the fundaments, and from the fundaments just to some degree of samadhi, and then from there going to the vipassana. So this is what I try to teach. And if we look again, if we look at the tradition, and one of my interests was to understand about the Ledi Sayadaw, because I learned and I was I got a lot of things from the Goenka, knowing that it's from Ubakin and Sadet and Ledi Sayadaw. So Ledi Sayadaw was really the one that was the for me, the gold treasurer, and I knew that his teachings will offer a much larger type of spectrum of possibilities. So this was my interest. So eventually, just a long answer to the question, eventually what I come with is what Ledi Sayadaw is teaching. So now, after all these years of practice with the Pa-Auk Sayadaw, I came to understand very well the details of this Ledi Sayadaw, because I learned the Burmese. I can read the books in Burmese, and then I went through a lot of his material. So we can see with Ledi Sayadaw that even a century ago he had the same challenge. And then he was, in one place he was saying that in these modern areas, and then he was speaking about Monyowa in the north of Burma, when the train, the British vapor train has reached there, and then there was a train station, just a train station in a faraway village in Burma. It brought such a difference in the way that the people were living in the villages. So the train was coming once a week or once in a while, and then it was bringing a commotion, or the whole vibes and the whole speed of the life change. So because of that, Ledi Sayadaw was saying that in the beginning of the last century, then there was too much activities, and lifestyle was too busy for people to reach a sufficient level of samatha. So I don't know what he would say if he was to be in this modern area.
That's amazing.
Era, yeah.
I mean, that's also just really fascinating, you talking about your journey to better understand Ledi Sayadaw and his teachings, leading you in some indirect or direct way to Pa-Auk Sayadaw and to studying his teachings and practicing those methods. And so that brings up an interesting contrast between the historical legacy and teachings of Ledi Sayadaw and the contemporary mission of Pa-Auk. And so I wonder if I can prompt you to speak on where we think so much of obviously Goenka and Ledi, or Ubakin and Ledi, but I haven't so much had a thought about the contrasting and looking at the impact of Ledi and Pa-Auk. So how would you describe that?
Well, for me, when I came back in Burma in 1995, like I did ordain over there in 1979, but I could not stay in the country because of the conditions. So in 95, when I came back there, my idea was just to go around the country and see all the different schools, and then meet the different teachers, and learn how that tradition of Theravada Buddhism was alive and had been kept alive with these different practice, with these different approaches and methods. But I ended up, right at the beginning, as I said, with the Pa-Auk Sayadaw, and then with this practice, I forgot about all the other things, But with this practice, the depth to which it brought me came to show me that the tradition is something on which the Ledi Sayadaw was basing his teachings. So by learning that depth with the Pa-Auk Sayadaw, then later on, when I learned the language and I looked in more details of the Ledi Sayadaw's books that were not translated, I saw the parallel, and then I was thinking, well, Ledi Sayadaw, the Pa-Auk Sayadaw is teaching the same thing as Ledi Sayadaw. Amazingly, yeah. So one of my enthusiasm was to to explain the Pa-Auk Sayadaw by way of the Ledi Sayadaw. So, yeah, because I was seeing so many parallels, but because Ledi Sayadaw was much more adapted to the age, as we saw with the colonization, and then the transmission to lay people, and then eventually the propagation of the vipassana internationally. So it was much more adapted and also much more simplified with just the essential. But in the background, all this material was there. Also, that's why, going in that depth with the Pa-Auk Sayadaw, I realized that the Ledi Sayadaw was also basing his teaching on that, but in a little bit more simplified form. So that's why, it's because it brought me so much understanding. And then this was my enthusiasm to share and to support the teaching of the Pa-Auk Sayadaw, because I saw the link, I saw the connection there.
Does Pa-Auk Sayadaw reference Ledi Sayadaw at all as a teacher or influence, or in referencing his writings and speaking about his own practice and teachings?
Well, if we look, I think Eric Brown showed that in his book. But if we look at all the schools of meditation practice and of Buddhism, in Burma during the last century, you had the famous Sayadaws like the Pa-Auk Sayadaw, and then Monin Sayadaw and Mahasi Sayadaw and Sunlun Sayadaw, they all got influenced by Ledi Sayadaw. Huh? Yeah, so but they don't acknowledge it necessarily, but definitely they were all affected by that, because it was everywhere, and he was the authority that people were that was given credit, and then with all his writings, so it was all over the place. So they had that model, they had that example, and they all use aspects of those teachings, and emphasize or develop their method according to that. But here and there, you will obviously see that this is just a copy of Ledi Sayadaw, like Mogok with his Paticca Well, he is taking that from Ledi Sayadaw. But the thing is that it's not Ledi Sayadaw, it's just a tradition. So Ledi Sayadaw, he will say, well, he's speaking about the tradition that he knows so well with the commentaries and the texts. So that's why putting the name of the founders of schools aside, then you just come back with the text and the suttas and the commentaries. So this is what is important for us if we want to be creative, if we want to come to something new. We have to put aside somehow the names of these schools, and also to say, okay, now that school and that teacher. Well, put that aside and look at where and from where these teachers and these schools develop. So then you go to the source, and the source is the commentarial and the tradition, the textual tradition, and this is coming from India. So that's all, and all of these things are available in these texts. So this is what they are referring to. They don't need to say, this Sayadaw said like that, and I'm doing the same. No, it's the same source.
Yeah, that's so interesting, and that's bringing a couple of different anecdotes in my mind. One is, I'm thinking of Friedgard, and speaking to her, I asked her at one point to what degree U referenced Ledi as being in the lineage in the same way that Goenka often does. And she laughed and said, well, Goenka was going outside of Burma. He had to establish his credentials and speak to an audience, an external audience, and explaining where he came from and what his practice was. But she said, for U Bakin to reference coming from a lady lineage, that would be like a Christian in Germany saying they came from Martin Luther lineage. Like, no one would do that, because the whole country had been impacted by Martin Luther, so no one would say that I'm practicing Christianity in kind of a Martin Luther way. No one in Burma would say I'm practicing Buddhism or meditation in a Ledi Sayadaw way, because so much had been affected and impacted by who he was and what he presented. And the other anecdote that comes to mind is when I remember when I was researching several years ago about this Meditator's Guidebook to Burma, and I was going through different lineage holders and different traditions, and on the Sayathaji section, there was a quote that we had found somewhere in Sayathaji describing his practice. I don't remember where it was. Someone had attributed, some student learning from him had attributed this quote to him, where he said something like, we can speak of the Ledi Sayadaw tradition and the Sayathaji method or technique, and that really helped to clarify things for me at that time, going forward, really until today, in ways I hadn't quite understood, with the, replacing the understanding of this mythology of the pristine purity and the way that Goenka describes the technique, and seeing that there was this, if you look at this Ledi Sayadaw tradition, it's this vast umbrella of possibility, and another way to say, as you've referenced, creativity, where it's almost like all of these different techniques and methods and practices that have grown out of the impact Ledi Sayadaw made. They're almost like these little incubators, of different teachers and methods that are able to draw upon the path that Ledi Sayadaw pointed to or spread out and showed those possibilities, and then different teachers according to their background and their, and I think that's where it's also so interesting to look at that background, where you have someone like Sun Lun, who, was famously a non-academic, hard scrabble farmer living off the land, and, that didn't know so much the intellectual or scholastic side of the practice, but knew about hard work and knew about living on the land and the seasons. And I've heard people reference how the Sun Lun practice is the practice itself is kind of indicative of the master who was teaching it in his background. And you could look at something similar with U Bakin or some of those other teachers that that just as this quote indicates that there's a Sayathaji method or practice, but a Ledi Sayadaw tradition, that these different teachers, according to their background, their makeup, their conditioning, their psychology, their karma, that they're able to draw upon this wider set of possibilities and develop a teaching based on really who they are and what their makeup is, that then is able to go out towards those students. And this, when developing this understanding for me, it also helped me to understand that, to kind of break down this one size fits all, and to realize that, okay, these teachers are all just doing the best that they can. They're doing, another way to say, panning for gold. They're based on their depth of understanding and who they are and where they came from. They're doing their best to put this all together in their own way, but what they're teaching and what they're showing is still going to be, there's going to be some limitations there based on the natural biases that anyone has as a person. And I think that sometimes, especially as a newer practitioner, that universalist messaging sometimes can confuse where those bias and cultural differences, as we said, linguistic differences, the way personalities develop, that there still is a field, a limited field of even some of the greatest teachers, that they're able to of what they're able to teach, and kind of where the gaps still are, that we as individual practitioners have to be responsible and mature really in our development and understanding, how we're able to adjust and fit into the different kinds of teachings and methods out there.
Yeah. So this is all right. And if we look at just the tradition itself with the texts, the Buddha says that no, you have you have this Upali, and then you have this Moggallana, and then you have this Sariputta, and all these teachers. They are attracting different students because people, the pupils also, when they learn something, they will develop something that is personal, and what they are going to be transmitting, what they are going to specialize themselves are according to their own temperament. So that's why the schools and the teachings are based on the personality of the founders. That's all. That's all. But they come from the same place, but they will take a taint, or they will give there will be an emphasis according to the one who has become the interpretator, and who has become also the reading teacher. So that's why you have many teachers, because all the people are different. If we look at the lady, you speak about Sonun Sayadaw. So Sonun Sayadaw, by the way, although he was illiterate, he is based on the Ledi Sayadaw's method, and it's after hearing the discourse of Ledi Sayadaw on Anapanasati that he thought, okay, now this is for me, and then he gave up all his properties, and he started to practice Anapana, but in a way that he interpret, the the hard breathing. If your breathing is not clear, you just breathe a little bit harder. Then, because he is a farmer and a kind of energetic person, then it became to be very hard, right? So the same thing with as you say, Sayadaw. So Sayadaw again gave some aspects of the methods, but Ledi Sayadaw was also acknowledging the fact that Sayadaw had read, although he didn't know Pali, he didn't know, he was not a scholar, Sayadaw had read all his Dipani, all his books of Ledi Sayadaw. He knew them by heart. So, but he was able to, to concise what he wanted to transmit, as a representative of Lady. But you are right in this. You are right when you say that these people don't say, out loud, "Oh, I am from Lady Sayadaw," right? And you started by saying, you mentioned about Fridgard, Lothar Mozart, the Venerable Akinchana, or Akinchana. So if she has not told you, she did her PhD thesis on the whole commentary of the Sinhalese, the Mahatika of the whole commentary of the Sinhalese. And the thesis is very interesting because she goes back with the different commentaries that were brought from India and that were used to compose the Visuddhimagga. So that's interesting as a piece of history. And that's interesting also to see the origin of the teachings. They are based on that. So they say, okay, now you are teaching according to the Visuddhimagga. You are, okay, now the tradition is based on the Visuddhimagga. Well, this is a, again, it's a limitation of interpretation. The Visuddhimagga is just, a kind of renewal, a kind of summary of what we did find in all the Sinhalese commentaries, which were translated from Indian language into Pali and also into Sinhalese. So this is an old tradition that had been preserved. Orally, by the teachers, and then eventually came to be written, and then that became also, just a systematic tradition. So the teachers, they base their teachings on that, and they will emphasize one aspect rather than another one.
Changing the topic a little bit, but still staying on Pa-Auk, I wanted to ask you about the ways that he has welcomed and invited female practitioners into his centers and mission. I from knowing nuns and female meditators in Myanmar, Pa-Auk has always been something of a refuge where they've felt welcomed and able to practice in a way that has not quite been as easy in other monasteries and meditation centers. And so, what can you say about the way that Pa-Auk has created an atmosphere and where female meditators and nuns can come and stay and practice for long periods of time, as well as what you understand about his views on women and the nun order?
Well, I think it's a good question. And then we come back again to the openness of the Sayadaw, his generosity, but also his openness of mind. And this is true that it's kind of characteristic of his monastery that he also gave the possibility for women to join and then to have their own, area of practice. Of course, you can see that at other places, but he was keen to have that, and also he has a lot of women that became teacher, and they were very good in the practice. So I think this is a credit that we need to give to him. Many women also, like if you speak to some women, whether Westerners or Asians, then they will acknowledge the kindness and the fairness that he is giving to women, the way that he encourages them to practice and about their possibility, their potential. But still, over there, you still have the culture, and then the people, unfortunately, they just it came to support and give credit more to monks. So this is there, but as much as possible, he tried to make it equal, and also to generate support that will also make the ladies comfortable in the monastery or in these places.
Right. Great. Well, I thank you so much again for taking the time to have another chapter of your life, and along with that, so much different fodder and content that you're able to comment on in such exquisite detail and depth. I really appreciate these conversations and where we end up.
Good. So it's my pleasure. So it's good.
We'd like to take this time to thank our generous supporters who have already given. We simply could not continue to provide you with this content and information without the wonderful support of generous donors, listeners, and friends like you. Each episode helps in providing access to one more voice, one more perspective, one more insight. Every donation of any size is greatly appreciated and helps us continue this mission. We greatly appreciate your generosity, which allows us to maintain this platform. Thank you. If you would like to join in our mission to support those in Myanmar who are being impacted by the military coup, we welcome your contribution in any form, currency, or transfer method. Your donation will go on to support a wide range of humanitarian and media missions, aiding those local communities who need it most. Donations are directed to such causes as the Civil Disobedience Movement, CDM, families of deceased victims, internally displaced person IDP camps, food for impoverished communities, military defection campaigns, undercover journalists, refugee camps, monasteries and nunneries, education initiatives, the purchasing of protective equipment and medical supplies, COVID relief, and more. We also make sure that our donation fund supports a diverse range of religious and ethnic groups across the country. We invite you to visit our website to learn more about past projects, as well as upcoming needs. You can give a general donation or earmark your contribution to a specific activity or project you would like to support, perhaps even something you heard about in this very episode. All of this humanitarian work is carried out by our nonprofit mission, Better Burma. Any donation you give on our Insight Myanmar website is directed towards this fund. Alternatively, you can also visit the Better Burma website, betterburma.org, and donate directly there. In either case, your donation goes to the same cause, and both websites accept credit card. You can also give via PayPal by going to paypal.me/betterburma. Additionally, we can take donations through Patreon, Venmo, GoFundMe, and Cash App. Simply search Better Burma on each platform and you'll find our account. You can also visit either website for specific links to these respective accounts or email us at info@betterburma.org. That's Better Burma, one word, spelled BETTERBURMA.org. If you would like to give it another way, please contact us. We also invite you to check out our range of handicrafts that are sourced from vulnerable artisan communities across Myanmar, available at alokacrafts.com. Any purchase will not only support these artisan communities, but also our nonprofit's wider mission. That's Aloka Crafts, spelled ALOKACRAFTS, one word, alokacrafts.com. Thank you so much for your kind consideration and support.